I was in the middle of parallel parking outside my sister's apartment when my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I almost ignored it. I'd been running late all day, the kind of late that starts with one missed alarm and snowballs into every traffic light in the city turning red the moment you approach it. But something made me reach over and flip the phone face up. It was a text from my mother. "Honey, your father and I have decided to move to Scottsdale. We're using some of the settlement money to put a down payment on a place out there. You understand, right? Love you." I sat in my half-parked car, engine still running, and read it 3 times. The settlement money. Not some money, not savings. The settlement money. The $310,000 that had been placed in a joint account, legally mine and my mother's, after my grandmother passed away 2 years ago. Money that came from the sale of my grandparents' property in rural Ohio, plus a small life insurance payout that my grandmother had explicitly told me she wanted used for our future. Her grandchildren's future. She'd pulled me aside at Christmas the year before she died, held both my hands in her papery ones and said, "That money is for you girls to stand on. Don't let anyone knock you off your feet." I called my sister immediately. She picked up before the second ring. "Did you get it too?" "Yeah." There was a pause. What does some of the settlement money mean? Neither of us knew yet. That was the thing. We didn't know how much some was. We didn't know if the transfer had already happened. We didn't know if there was anything left to protect. What I did know, sitting in my car on a street in Columbus with my hazard lights blinking, was that I had about 48 hours before the weekend, when banks would be harder to reach, to figure out what was happening to the money my grandmother had trusted us with. Let me back up a little. My name is not important to this story, but the details are. I'm 31. I work as a financial analyst for a mid-sized insurance company downtown, which my mother has always treated as proof that I can handle the money stuff, meaning whenever there's something financial and confusing, she defers to me. When my grandmother's estate was being settled, it was me on the phone with the probate attorney. It was me who organized the documents, tracked the property appraisal, coordinated with the title company. My sister handled the emotional weight of those months. I handled the paperwork. My parents have not been financially stable for most of my adult life. My father worked in manufacturing management until his plant downsized when I was 19, and he never quite recovered his footing after that. He took lower-level jobs, quit 2 of them over what he described as principal, and spent a significant portion of my childhood talking about opportunities that were just around the corner. My mother worked part-time at a dental office for years, which she recently left because the commute was getting to her. They own a home in a suburb of Columbus that has more equity in it than they probably deserve, given how little they've maintained it. They are not bad people. I want to be clear about that. They are people who have spent their whole lives feeling like they were one break away from the life they deserved, and that feeling made them make choices I couldn't always explain or defend. My grandmother knew this about her daughter. She loved her. She loved both her children deeply. But she knew. The settlement account had been set up in my name and my mother's name jointly, largely for logistical reasons during the estate process. The intention was always that it would be transferred to a new account once everything was finalized. I had the paperwork drafted. I had the new account ready. We just hadn't executed the final transfer yet because my mother kept saying she needed a little more time to feel comfortable with the process, and because I trusted her, because she was my mother, had let it sit. That was my mistake, and I knew it the second I read that text. I did not call my parents that night. I know that might seem cold, but I'd learned over the years that confronting my mother on anything financial before I had full information was like arguing with someone who'd already decided the ending. She would cry. She would bring up sacrifices. She would mention the years she drove me to swim practice at 5:30 in the morning, which yes, happened, and yes, I'm grateful for, but which also had nothing to do with whether she had the right to withdraw money from an account that was supposed to go to her grandchildren's generation. Instead, I drove to my sister's apartment and we sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open and a bottle of wine we barely touched. My sister is 3 years older than me. She's warmer than I am, quicker to laugh, slower to cut people off. She had taken our grandmother's death harder than anyone, in that quiet way where you seem fine at the funeral and then cry in the car on the way home for 6 months. She had also, I knew, been putting her own feelings about our parents on a shelf for a long time, stacking them neatly, not examining them too closely. She was examining them now. "How much do you think they took?" she asked. "I don't know. I can't see the account balance without logging into the joint portal, and I don't want to tip them off that I'm looking." "Can they clean it out entirely?" I exhaled slowly. "Technically, yes. It's a joint account. Either party can withdraw the full balance. That's why I've been trying to get the transfer done." She was quiet for a moment. "So we could wake up tomorrow and it could just be gone." "That's the scenario I'm trying to avoid." We talked through options. I could call the bank first thing in the morning and request a freeze pending a dispute, but that required documentation and time. I could consult the estate attorney, which I was going to do regardless. I could. And this was the option that felt most like me, like the version of myself my grandmother had believed in. Simply get ahead of them. The joint account had two authorized parties. I was one of them. I looked at my sister across the kitchen table. "I have the online credentials for the account." She met my eyes. "I know you do. If I transfer the remaining balance to the estate sub-account tonight, the one in my name only, it's legally defensible. I was always going to be the primary beneficiary. We have documentation. The intent of the account is documented in the estate correspondence. Mom was named jointly for administrative convenience during probate, not as a co-beneficiary." My sister nodded slowly. "What time does the bank close online transfers?" I checked. Midnight. It was 9:47 p.m. We called the estate attorney's after-hours line. I left a message explaining the situation. Then I opened the account portal on my sister's laptop. The balance was $298,400. They had already taken $11,600. My hands were steady. I don't know why. Maybe because I'd spent years doing financial work where your hands have to be steady. Or maybe because I'd been preparing for some version of this moment for longer than I'd admitted to myself. I initiated the transfer to the sub-account, entered the authentication code that came to my cell phone, confirmed. It went through at 10:14 p.m. Then I closed the laptop and sat back in my sister's kitchen chair and thought about my grandmother standing at her kitchen counter in Ohio, rolling pie crust at 6 in the morning because she liked the house quiet when she baked. I thought about the way she'd held my hands. I thought about how she had seen this coming, maybe, in the way that old women sometimes see things that everyone else is too close to notice. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. My mother called me at 7:15 the next morning. I was already awake. I'd barely slept. I'd spent most of the night going over the paper trail I'd need if this went to dispute. Estate documents, email correspondence, the attorney's notes from the initial settlement meeting where the purpose of the account had been discussed. I was prepared. That didn't make the phone ringing any easier. "Honey," she said, and her voice had that specific tone she used when she was managing something. "I noticed some activity on the account this morning." "Yes," I said. "I transferred the funds." Silence. "What do you mean you transferred the funds?" "I moved the remaining balance to an account in my name. I spoke with our estate attorney last night. Given your text message indicating your intention to use the money for a real estate purchase in Scottsdale, I took steps to protect the remaining funds per the documented intent of Grandma's estate." Another silence, longer this time. "You can't just... That money is in both our names." "It was in both our names for administrative purposes during probate. That's documented in the estate correspondence. If you have questions, you're welcome to reach out to the attorney directly. I've already asked him to review the situation." "Natalie." Her voice shifted then. The management tone dropped away and something rawer came through. "Natalie, we needed that money. We've been struggling, you know that. Your father and I, Scottsdale was supposed to be a fresh start. The cost of living, we could stretch that money so much further out there, we just thought." "You thought you'd text me the news after the fact." She didn't say anything. "Mom." I pressed my fingers against the edge of the counter, focused on that pressure. That money was Grandma's. She told me. She told me directly that it was for me and my sister. It wasn't for a house in Scottsdale. It wasn't for a fresh start. It was for us. "Where are your parents?" Her voice broke on the last word, and I felt it. "I want you to know that. I'm not made of stone. I felt it in my sternum. Doesn't that mean anything? It means everything, I said. That's why I'm not going to let you spend my grandmother's inheritance on something you'll resent me for in 5 years when it runs out. I heard her crying softly. I heard my father say something in the background. I couldn't make out the words. I waited. We already put a deposit down, she said finally, on the place in Scottsdale. The 11,000. Then that's your decision and your consequence, I said. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. But I'm not going to pretend that what you tried to do was okay. I hung up. Then I sat down on my kitchen floor and stayed there for a while. Here's what happened over the next 2 weeks, because I know that's what you're wondering. My parents did not go to Scottsdale. The deposit on the place, $11,000, non-refundable per the terms of the listing, was lost. My father called me twice. The first call was to tell me I had broken my mother's heart. The second call was quieter, 3 days later, and he said, I need you to know we were desperate, Natalie. I'm not asking you to agree with what we did. I'm asking you to understand it. That call was harder because I did understand it. That call was harder because I did understand it. Understanding it didn't change what I was going to do. The estate attorney confirmed in writing that my mother had no legal claim to the transferred funds. He also noted, gently, that she could challenge the transfer, but that any challenge would require her to argue against the documented estate intent, which she had actually signed during the original probate proceedings. Her attorney, if she chose to hire one, would have a very difficult case. She did not hire an attorney. My sister and I met with the estate attorney together and formalized the account restructuring. The $198,400 was divided into 2 equal accounts, one for me, one for my sister, both protected under individual custodianship. We had it done in 9 days. My mother and I did not speak for 6 weeks. When she finally reached out, it was a text, not a call. She said she was sorry she hadn't talked to me before texting about Scottsdale. She said she should have handled it differently. She did not say she was sorry for withdrawing the $11,000, and I noticed that. I didn't point it out. I said I was glad she reached out. I said I loved her. I meant both of those things. My father found part-time consulting work through a former colleague. He seems more settled now than he did then, which I think has something to do with the fact that the mirage of Scottsdale, the idea that they could just cash in and start over, has been dissolved. Some people need the door to close before they'll stop standing in the hallway. I still think about that deposit they lost. $11,000 gone. It bothers me in the way that watching someone get hurt by their own bad decision bothers you. You feel sorry for them. You do. And at the same time, there's nothing you could have done to stop it that you didn't already try. The thing I keep coming back to, though, isn't any of that. It's not the money, or the attorney, or the 6 weeks of silence, or the quiet phone call from my father. It's the night at my sister's kitchen table. After I executed the transfer, after we both exhaled, she poured 2 small glasses of that wine we'd been ignoring and pushed one across the table to me. We sat there for a while without saying much. At some point she said, Grandma would have known what to do. Grandma did know what to do, I said. She told me. My sister smiled at that, the tired, real kind of smile. Not the one she puts on at family holidays. Don't let anyone knock you off your feet. I don't know if I'll ever fully untangle how I feel about my parents. I love them. I'm frustrated by them. I grieve the version of them I needed when I was younger that I didn't quite get. I have compassion for the versions of themselves they're trying to hold together. All of those things are true at the same time, and I've stopped trying to make them line up neatly. What I know is this. My grandmother worked her whole life for something, and she was deliberate about where it should go. Honoring that wasn't just about the money, it was about telling her across whatever distance exists after someone is gone, that I heard her, that I held her hands back. That mattered more than Scottsdale ever could. I still think about my grandmother's hands, the way they felt holding mine, dry and warm and certain, like she'd already made peace with everything she was about to leave behind. She didn't say, protect the money. She said, don't let anyone knock you off your feet. There's a difference. One is about a number in an account. The other is about who you decide to be when it gets hard. What happened with my parents wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad luck. They had spent years making small choices, quitting jobs over principle, deferring hard conversations, treating every financial problem like something that would eventually resolve itself if they just waited long enough. And when my grandmother died and left behind something real, something solid, those years of small choices accumulated into one large one. They reached for money that wasn't theirs to take and told themselves a story about why it was okay. That's how it usually works. Consequences don't show up announced. They're the sum of everything that came before, arriving on a Tuesday morning when a deposit gets declined and suddenly the story you've been telling yourself stops making sense. I don't say that to be cruel about them. I say it because I had to understand it to stop being angry about it. My parents aren't villains. They're people who wanted relief so badly that they stopped asking whether they'd earned it, and relief that you haven't earned has a very short shelf life. Scottsdale would have lasted 2, maybe 3 years before the same patterns reasserted themselves in a warmer climate. What I had to do, staying steady at my sister's kitchen table at 10 o'clock at night, pulling up that account portal, executing that transfer, took something I didn't know I had until I needed it. Not cleverness, exactly. More like the willingness to act on what I knew was right, even when the easier thing would have been to wait and see, to give them the benefit of the doubt one more time, to tell myself maybe I'd misread the text. I hadn't misread anything. And I think the reason I was able to act clearly was because my grandmother had been clear with me. She told me what the money was for. That directness was a gift. It gave me something to stand on when everything else felt shaky. My sister and I are closer now than we were before any of this happened. There's something about sitting at a kitchen table at night, making a hard decision together, that changes a relationship in a permanent way. We didn't agree on everything about how to handle our parents going forward. We still don't. But we both understood what we were protecting and why. That shared understanding is worth more to me than any dollar amount. I think about what it means to actually take care of someone. Not just show up for the easy parts, the holidays, the milestones, but show up for the things they asked you to carry. My grandmother asked me to carry something. I almost let it slip because I trusted too long and moved too late. One day's difference. That sits with me. Not as guilt, not anymore, but as a reminder that doing right by the people who believed in you requires more than good intentions. It requires paying attention. It requires being willing to see clearly even when clarity is uncomfortable. And when the moment comes, it requires you to actually move. Don't let anyone knock you off your feet. I heard her. I held on.